Hey guys, sorry I'm a little late. I've been busy at work and working on some music and other stuff. Keep an ear out on Your Maker's channel for some of my music and a shout out. I'm also working on an upcoming collab with Let's Read Again. Gonna redeem myself. I've also gotten an okay to collab with That Creepy Reading. We had a pretty good discussion and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to email me with your true scary stories. Behave, ya creeps. Hi, I've been a lurker on here for a while now, so I thought I'd join. Sorry if this is a bit scrambled. This is my first post. I'm 15 and I'm a female, and this happened to me when I was about 11. Just to give you a bit of background, my dad used to live in quite a rough part of town, drugs, fight, etc. One day we had to go shopping, so my dad was just taking out some money from the cash machine. He told me and my sister to go sit on this wall so that he could take some photos of us smiling. We were just mucking around when this guy came up to us. He was wearing a hoodie and had a cap pulled over his head. But the first thing I noticed was that he had a scar down his face. "Those are nice photos," he said. My dad says thanks and then turns around. Then he says, "Are you sure they're your daughters? They don't look like you." My dad is kind of puzzled. "I hope you haven't taken them," he said suspiciously. My dad just takes it as a joke, but then says it's time we went home. But the guy tags along. They're just talking when he says, "Why don't I come back to your place?" I remember gripping onto my sister's hand when he said that. I give my dad a pleading look, and he says he can't because we've got to get home for our tea. He pauses, but then goes in to give my dad a hug. I held my breath when he did that, because he had his hand tucked into his jacket, so I thought he might have had a knife. He steps back and asks if he could give the little girls a hug too, this creepy smile on his face. My dad says a firm no, so he wishes us a good day and walks off. I didn't think too much of it until a few weeks later, when we were just sitting in the car when these two guys asked us for some money. My dad said he didn't have any, and then we went into the shops. I got quite nervous, but then I noticed that one of the guys was him. He smiles at me. "That's a nice steering wheel," he says, running his hands along it. He fiddles with the door. It would have been easy for him to just get in. My dad sees what's going on and jumps into the car and quickly does up the windows. He turns on the engine and drives off, and the guys have to jump out of the way. I might have imagined it, but I think they threw some things at the car as we drove off. So creepy Scarface guy who tried to get in the car with us, let's not meet again. Like ever. Are you sure they're your daughter? Are you sure they're your Are you sure they're your daughters? Are you sure they're your Wow, that's hard to say. A few months before my 9th birthday, I was almost kidnapped. Basically, this guy came into our backyard where my brother and I were playing and told me he had some early birthday present for me in his car, but he needed help getting it out. And of course, I went to help him. My 6-year-old brother, the jealous little bastard that he was, went crying to my mom, asking why this guy didn't get him a present. This sent my mom flying out the door and into the car park behind our complex and dragging me out of the shitty red 4-door sedan before the guy could pull out of the lot. But not before he put his sopping wet lips on my cheeks and his heavy hand on my waist. I'm 17, almost 18 now, but I'll still never forget the smell of stale cigarette smoke that lingered on his breath and feeling the wetness on my cheek. Turns out the guy was an ex of my mom's, so she knew exactly who to report to the police. They found him that same day, and after months of waiting for a court date, we finally got one. They never made me testify in front of him. Instead, my testimony was filmed at a previous date and played out in the courtroom while we were holed up in the shelter for women and children fleeing abuse. At some point, we received news that he had pleaded guilty, but was only sentenced to 1 year. This, of course, terrified me. In a year, he'd be out walking the same streets as me, and my mom and I didn't know how to deal with that. So we packed up and moved to a smaller town, about 3 hours away from the city. It wasn't ideal, but I guess it was necessary. During the years we were there, we all moved on, and I didn't think too much of it once I stopped going to therapy for it when I was around 12. About 2 years ago, we moved back into the city because my mom was offered a job she just couldn't turn down. I had completely forgotten about the events and was mostly excited about reconnecting with childhood mates. We got a flat on the opposite end of the city from where I grew up, so I was bummed I wouldn't actually be seeing my old mates, but still, I was excited to start a new school and meet new people. Things went off without a hitch for the longest time. Then late last year, while I was walking to school, I spotted a red car parked across the street of my school. I was flooded with dread, and I practically ran into the school, where I watched the car from a foyer for a few minutes. I know there are probably millions of red cars in this huge city that we live in, but before running into the building, I saw a dent on the driver's door, and remembered how my mom had repeatedly kicked and banged at the car door while she pulled on the handles. I felt ill, and I went home early that day when the car disappeared. I tried to forget about it, even tried to brush it off, like maybe it wasn't the same guy. How would he even know where I ended up? It's been like 9 years, and he's probably forgotten about me, right? Still, I was pretty on edge for a while, but after a few dented red carless months, I forgot about it. After all, I was too worried about homework and shit. Graduation was coming up. Graduation is now 3 weeks away, and unfortunately, I will not be attending. In the past 3 months, I had spotted the red car again. It would sometimes be sat in the car park across the street from our flat, other times across the street from my school. At some point last month, it trailed behind me on my morning walk to school. Since then, I've become too afraid to leave my home, and I've isolated myself into my room. I've fallen behind in school and decided to drop out and just get my GED, much to my mom's dismay. I did tell her that I didn't want to go to school anymore, but I didn't say why. Last week, I went to turn up the AC in my room because it had gotten really hot, and the red car outside of my window caught my eye right away. I can always tell when it is, in fact, the car, and not just some random because of all of the crap in the back seat. It looked like someone was living out of it or something. I can't stand being holed up in here anymore. I'm considering going to the police to get the initial case file. Because while I remember the color of his hair and the smell of his breath, I can't seem to recall a face or name, and I'd like to know who exactly to look out for. A part of me still thinks it might not be him, but I've lost too much at this point, and I really need to know. I haven't left the house on my own for weeks now. I would like to go to the police, but honestly, I feel like I can't report anything because I have no real evidence or anything. I don't know what to do. I'm scared and I feel so alone. I've never told anyone about this, and I was really hoping I wouldn't have to. This started about a month ago, on weekends. To help better explain the story, I'll explain my house. The house is actually a rather large 2-story house, or was. It was split into 3 separate apartments, well before I even moved in. There are 2 down on the first floor and 1 upstairs. The apartment next door is occupied by one of my best friends, and the upstairs apartment is very recently empty. I've lived here for 6 years, with a roommate, our 3 cats, and my dog. Her and I have never had any issues prior to this, but very recently our dog started barking randomly at nothing during the night, or so we thought. He would look out a window very intently, then run to the front door barking the whole way. We actually thought he was just seeing a cat or a rabbit, and brushed it off, just telling him to hush. One night, my friend/neighbor came knocking at my door and said he thought he had seen someone outside on his porch. He said he had grabbed a cane and tried to follow them, but they jumped over the porch and ran off. Since then, we made sure to check every time my dog seemingly barked at nothing during the night, and my neighbor had seen a figure suddenly bolt at least twice upon checking. We've called the cops, but they said there wasn't much they could do. They asked if there was anyone we thought could be messing with us, and while there were some neighbors we occasionally had to call the landlord on, there was no one we could think of. The issues we had never been more serious than them being a little loud at 3 a.m. on a drunken Friday night. So we continued to live our normal lives. My roommate works third shift, while I and my neighbor work second shift, although he had just recently switched to this shift from thirds himself. Nothing ever happened to me while I was alone, and I figured it was over. Recently, however, I got a girlfriend, and due to scheduling, we usually spend the night at her house in the middle of the week, as those are often when my days off occur, meaning at night there was no one home except for my dog, as my roommate only has weekends off. Last week I was at my girlfriend's, and things weren't going well. We'd had a bit of a fight, so I was lying in bed, mulling things over in my head, unable to sleep. As I'm lying there around 2 a.m., my phone buzzes. I check it, and it's a text from my roommate, asking me to call her when I got the text. I figure she's on break at work and just bored, or wants to shoot the shit about Overwatch since it had just came out and I hadn't got to play it yet, not having been home. I give her a call, and she says she's at home and thinks somebody had been in the house. I ask what makes her think that, and she says our friend/neighbor had gotten home late from his job around 1:30. He said he'd been home watching random stuff on YouTube, laughing rather loudly since he thought he was literally the only person in the house. He said he had thought he heard someone walking around, and at first thought it was me until he remembered I was at my girlfriend's. He wondered why my dog didn't bark until he realized I'd taken my dog with me since her kids wanted to meet him. He called my roommate to ask her if she'd called off work when he said he started hearing a scratchy meow outside his window. He walked outside to find our eldest cat outside, meowing to be allowed back into the house. Our cats never go outside normally, but had once before, so he scooped him up and went over to our apartment. The door that separates our apartments is normally unlocked, since he comes over a lot, and put him down. He tells my roommate this, and she said she then told her boss, who told her to come home. Roommate came home and said she never found our front door unlocked, which she never leaves unlocked. And the door in our sunroom was shut. We never shut that door since our cat's litter boxes are in there, and they wouldn't be able to get into them if we did. She's checking around and finds boxes moved out of our hall closet and a bunch of my card game and board game boxes scattered around, not how we had left them. She said she then heard a meow and found one of our cats shut in the bedroom. Every day before she leaves, she makes sure no cats are in there, since one has a bad habit of pissing on the bed if shut in there. Also, our bass guitar was knocked off its guitar stand and onto the floor. None of our cats weigh enough to knock over things like that, especially not our kitten, who was shut in there. So she gets freaked out and checks the windows. One in the sunroom is open, so the cats can sit in it and get some air, but the screen is untouched. She said she went outside and found a trash can up against the house under the window, as if someone had stood up on it to peep in. So best we can figure, whoever this person is was sneaking around again, and when they didn't hear our dog, they broke in. They must have been in the middle of looking through our stuff when they heard my neighbor laughing, panicked, and ran off. I'm not taking any of this lightly, and will be acquiring a gun since I'm often here alone at night. So person who's been sneaking around outside my friend and I's window and broke into my apartment, for your sake, let's not meet.